If you have said to yourself, I should write that, or if someone has said to you, you should write that, then I'm talking to you because you need to write. And that's why you're tuned in to yWrite. Hi, welcome to yWrite. I'm your host, Angela Grout. Thank you for tuning in to this great episode and this great show where we get to meet writers, find out what they're writing, how they wrote it, and, get you to be interested in what they're writing. And if you're a writer, get you interested in what you need to write. So today I have in studio Linda Cardillo. She is here from Western Massachusetts. She's an award-winning author of historical fiction and historical romance. She writes about the old country and the new, incorporating families and their tangled lives. Because, some of us have tangled lives. I think all of us do. We're going to talk to her today about, writing about these tangled lives and about loss and, how to bring some healing. The characters she writes about, let me tell you, it's going to bring you as a reader into worlds that to show, we're all searching to connect and belong somewhere. So that's what her characters are doing, and they're very relatable. She has won multiple awards. We're going to talk about that. And the cool thing is she's written about a lot of locations. Like her novels are kind of set in certain locations like Italy and Martha's Vineyard. So if you're a fan of those places, you're definitely going to want to read Linda Cardillo's books. She has published over a dozen adult novels. She's even done a children's book. And you know what? I found out that she knows 4 languages, plays the piano every night. So I want to welcome her into the show. And we're going to talk to her about everything she does. So welcome, Linda Cardillo.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you for coming in.
It's great to be here.
Thanks. So, there's so much, that I'm finding out about you. I'm like, she's got 4. I feel like people who write are busy. That we do a lot of things. We multitask. People are like, how are you balancing all this? You started as an editor.
Yes.
So you weren't a writer.
Well, I was a writer wannabe.
Okay.
Okay. Certainly from the time I was probably 12 or 13 years old.
So you were writing all the time?
All the time. But the sort of the job of my dreams was to be in a New York publishing house, but I didn't get to a New York publishing house, but I got to a Boston one.
Yeah.
Almost right after college. Started as a secretary because that's what you did back in those days.
Of course, yes. You started ground floor.
Ground floor. Worked myself up to editing assistant and then became an editing supervisor. I wasn't working on fiction, which would have been my dream, but...
you're working on textbooks.
I was working on college textbooks.
I'm like, snooze.
Right.
But, I can see how important it is to make sure editing, especially in the textbooks, are.
Right. And so I developed a number of skills, not only... As an editing supervisor, I was giving instruction to the copy editor, the proofreader, but I had to understand what the problems were in a manuscript. I also had to deal with very cranky authors and learned some sort of diplomatic skills in terms of people who thought they knew everything.
Well, I was just going to say, when you're doing a textbook, you're talking to an author who knows everything about that subject.
That's right.
So if you're telling them, this needs to be changed, I'm sure they're like, no. And I almost feel like for people who write memoirs, it's similar to textbook because it's their Bible. They're the only ones who know that. Whereas you're doing fiction, sometimes you can, we can embellish.
That's right, we can. So I developed those skills, but it also gave me some insight when I became a writer myself and was getting feedback from my own editor and really understanding now kind of what her position was versus the writer's position.
Yes, you don't have to be so defensive.
Yes, exactly. Although the very first time when I got my first manuscript back from my editor, who has since become a wonderful friend, there were marks on every page and bubbles in the margins and blue lines through. It
just crushes your spirit.
Oh my gosh!
It crushes. You're like, what? Yes. Did you even read the story? Did you like the story?
It was really troubling. But in conversation with other authors, we all have that same first experience. Yeah. And I learned a lot from her in how to construct a story.
So your first book was written in, you told me the year, because I have it written down.
Yeah, so it was published in 2007.
Yeah.
But what you should know and other writers should know is it took me 10 years to write that book.
Yeah.
I was working full time and raising 3 kids, and I would carve out whatever time I could, almost every day. I was very disciplined about that. But nevertheless, it took 10 years between the research and the writing. And then it took me 5 years to find an agent.
So, I mean, and I know the writing process can be long for a lot of us. I mean, sometimes the writing process can be quick, but the editing process and the formatting takes longer. So, yes, 10 years is very reasonable.
Yes,
it's reasonable, believe it or not.
Yes, it is.
But and you were writing, it was a romance.
It was a romance, although I didn't know it was a romance at the time.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, did you sit down and say, I'm going to write a romance?
No.
Okay.
No, and this is, so I was writing essentially a story based on my grandmother's life.
Okay.
She was an Italian immigrant who came at the age of 16 to New York in 2006.
Wow.
And
I started writing my...
I'm sorry, 1906.
Okay, because I'm like, I started writing my great-grandmother's. I'm like, and mine was, 1917.
Sorry, I know. I have to get to the right century.
Yes.
And because my parents and my aunt had saved the love letters that my grandparents had written to each other. And I was like, wow. So I was writing something else, and I was given the gift of these letters, and I thought, here's my story.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of research. Actually, I was living in Europe at the time, so I got to go down to Italy to her village.
Okay.
And then I did a great deal of research when I came back to the States. She settled in Mount Vernon, New York. Mount Vernon, New York has a wonderful local history room that you can make an appointment to use. And there were original documents related to my grandparents.
Wow, that's so cool. I mean, you did a lot of research, and it's fun when the research is travel.
Right. And there were, there was microfiche from the newspapers at that time. There were photographs. So I had a very rich source of material for the background that I could then use as a foundation for this. So when you're
writing a fictional story, when you're doing like a bibliography, if it was like an autobiography of your grandma something, you would have to have that bibliography in the back of I found this information here. But when you're doing fiction, you don't really have to do that.
No. Yeah. Although I did do that for the Renaissance book that I wrote. Because I actually had over 50 sources, and a lot of it, although it was a fictionalized account of this Renaissance poet and her relationship with Michelangelo, I felt it was necessary to have a bibliography for that level of research. For my first book, I didn't have a bibliography. And so when my agent finally had an editor who was interested, and this is after almost a year of sending it out, I asked her, who it was, and she said, it's an editor at Harlequin. And I sort of, took a step back, and I thought, they're going to put Fabio on the cover as my grandfather with no shirt on. Is this really how I envisioned my grandparents' story? But the head of the agency said to me, Linda, you may have an old-fashioned perception of what Harlequin is. Their mission right now, and this was 2005, is to dominate women's fiction in the world. They're well on their way to doing that, and you would be an idiot not to consider this offer. And the editor wanted me to make changes, and that's where I was a little suspicious. But she said, ask the editor what she wants. And so the editor came back to me with a memo. She had 5 points. They all were enhancing the historical background, had nothing to do with making it a Harlequin romance.
Okay.
And so
you weren't having to make scenes sexier. No. Because that's what, you do think Harlequin as, that.
Right. And so what I learned is that Harlequin, produces a spectrum of romance from this, what they call the sort of very sweet to the very spicy. Mine was sort of somewhere in the middle. Nice. And they were also launching a new line with my book. And so I answered the editor's query about how I would enhance the historical background. She bought the book the next day.
Wow.
And
so you got an advance on it?
I got an advance. And then was sort of put into this sort of pipeline of working with art design and coming up with they didn't like my title, and that's something.
And the title now is what? Dancing on Sunday
Dancing
Afternoons.
on Sunday Afternoons. Yeah. The original title was The Palace of Dreams, which was not just a metaphor for America. It was also the name of my grandfather's saloon.
Oh.
But the marketing department said that title isn't going to work, so we went back and forth. But they actually did take it. Dancing on Sunday Afternoons was my title that I brought to them. I suggested, and they accepted. And then I worked with the cover designers to.
How long is that process from the time that you get signed? They give you the advance, and now all of a sudden,
right? I signed in September of 2005, and the book was published in February of 2007. So it was about 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's something for people to understand. It's not,
especially with the traditional.
Publisher. If you're being published traditionally, it's at least 18 months timeline.
Well, and what I've learned with traditional publishers is they only take on so many books for each kind of season.
Exactly.
So of course, if you're seeing them in the fall, they're like, okay, well, we're not going to be ready for you until maybe next fall or the following spring. And all of a sudden you're like, and that's one of the reasons that I think a lot of published authors go self-publishing.
That's right. Which is what I wound up doing after I wrote 4 books for Harlequin.
With Harlequin. When you did the first book, when you did Dancing on Sunday Afternoons, did they say to you, we want more books?
Oh, immediately.
Okay.
Like I signed a contract for 3 more books before Dancing on Sunday Afternoons was even published. So you wrote 1, and now all of a sudden you got the pressure of doing 3 more. What I tell people is it took me 10 years to write the first book, and it takes.
Sorry, my snooze is going off.
All right. It took me 10 months to write the second book because I had a deadline, and I also they bought the books on an idea. I didn't have to produce the manuscript.
And it's not a series. It's not a continuing. They're just individual books. But those particular ones, are they all set in Italy?
No.
Okay. Because I know you have 5 books that are all kind of set in Italy?
Italy. 5, right. Yeah. 5, there's sort of 5 books that I call my Italian stories.
Yeah. And then you have the Martha Vineyard.
And I have the Martha's Vineyard series, and then I have a couple of novellas that are sort of one-off, right?
Okay, yeah.
But what Harlequin asked me to do was to give them a 3-page synopsis of an idea, and they bought it based on that those 3 pages. Once I had produced a complete manuscript, the first book, you always have to produce a complete manuscript. Yeah. It's very rare
that they're going to buy it on an idea.
With fiction that they're going to buy on an idea. Nonfiction, if it's someone who's established in a field, they might buy it based on an outline and a synopsis. But for fiction, your first book, you have to have a complete manuscript that's in pristine.
So you had to come up with 3 more inspired ideas.
Yes.
That weren't a series. How close did those books come to your synopsis?
So that's a very good question. So for the most part, the books followed the synopsis, but what I have always found, and now I write a synopsis for myself with all my subsequent books, and what I've always found is sort of midway through the book, my characters will sort of shift a little bit, or they'll talk to me and say, no, we're not going to go in that direction. We're going to go in this direction, and so. And it's always interesting to me to look back at the original synopsis and see where I diverged and where I diverged and why I diverged.
Does it need to be there? Did you sidetrack and say, reel it back in, reel it back in?
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. You brought up, how the characters, the muse, whatever, especially when we're in a fictional world, we're locked in our head with these voices and these people, and have they come to you before you've started writing, especially with the first book or even with your most recent book, Paint the Wind, or is it something that you're taking pen to paper and you're creating the character from scratch?
So for the most part, before I even put a word on the page, I have gotten the idea and have worked through at least a rough what I usually do. After I create the synopsis, I will do a scene by scene. It's not really an outline.
I would say kind of an outline.
It's kind of an outline, but it's basically a list of scenes, so that when I sit down to write every day, I already know what I'm going to be writing about.
And are you writing it in that particular order, or do you pick?
Sometimes I pick.
Yeah.
Sometimes I pick. You know, if I know I don't have a lot of time, or I'm just feeling like kind of low energy, I'll pick an easy scene.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I
Yeah.
did Bean in My Breast, I had that, I had all the little, what I wanted. And then I was like, which one do I want to do today? Oh, I'll write about feet first.
Right,
And then set your timer, do your feet
exactly.
first. But then I found that editing it afterwards is harder.
It is hard because then you have to weave them together. What I have wound up doing for my more complex books is I use an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
And I have columns for each chapter, and I basically, one of the columns will be a one-sentence synopsis of what takes place in a chapter, and who the main characters are, opening sentence and closing sentence. That's
Okay.
very helpful when I'm trying to connect
Okay.
separate chapters that I have written.
That's good.
Having the opening sentence and the closing sentence is a real necessity in terms of pulling things together. I'll often also put how many pages there
Yeah,
are.
I've done that. I do pages and word count so
right,
that
and
each
word count.
chapter can kind of...
Exactly, because you
piece
don't
it
want a 20-page chapter and then a 3-page
Right.
chapter. You need some balance. So I have found, because I have a sort of analytical mind, and so the spreadsheet really works for me. Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about your analytical mind, because you work for a magazine company.
Yes.
Ink. I always
Yes.
want to say Ink, but
Right.
INC, not
INC,
INK.
right.
Ink magazine, and you worked in the circulation department, so
That's
that
right.
definitely makes your mind be a little bit more analytical,
Yes.
trying to figure out how you're going to sell
Yes.
copies.
That's right.
Which is something that so many authors need to learn. I mean, how did working in the circulation department for Ink magazine help you to market your own books?
So it was very helpful, and the other thing that helped is that I have an MBA, and my focus was in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So I already have sort of a marketing mindset, but I also learned there are some specifics to marketing books that I have found over the 20 years that I've been writing and selling books. Conferences and workshops really help because you're sharing ideas with other authors. One of the very first things that I did was to start a newsletter. And I started a newsletter with my 29 Italian cousins and everybody I worked with and friends. So it wasn't a very big newsletter, but even before the book came out, I started sending out a newsletter saying.
So is your newsletter, and I wish I was able to peek at it before again. So your it's online.
It's online.
And for the newsletter, you're talking about your writing process, or are you talking more about, hey, I want to introduce you to the new character I'm working on?
Both.
Okay.
It's a variety of things. So, for 20 years I've been writing this newsletter, and I keep coming up with new things to write about.
Yeah.
But quite often, like, for example, if I go to Italy for my research, I take lots of pictures, and I will share that in my newsletter, pictures, and I will talk about parts of the story that these photographs reflect. I certainly, when I have a new book coming out, I will offer excerpts, a chapter, try to build some enthusiasm and interest. I'll write,
Random order chapters, or do you do chapter one?
Usually chapter one.
Yeah.
Usually chapter one. But occasionally I might throw something in.
Yeah, because sometimes I'll do the first chapter, but when I do introductory readings, like if I'm at a library or something, sometimes I'll just pick a random.
Exactly. Yes. If I'm doing a live reading, I'll read from various parts of the book. But generally, in the newsletter, I would want people to be pulled into the very beginning of the book. I try to make the newsletter visual as well, but that's because I'm a visual, a visual learner.
Yeah.
So I'll always have images. And
how many hours a day do you work on
that versus writing? Yeah,
writing or editing or doing the newsletter? Do you have like a certain schedule?
And I also have.
And you're retired now, right?
Yeah, I'm retired. Yes.
So you have the time. Sometimes when we're retired, we're even busier.
I know, you are busier, but what I probably should go back a little bit is when I left Harlequin, which was Harlequin was starting to slip.
And this was, you did your 4 books.
I did
for
my
them.
4 books.
You've gotten paid.
And-
You're
right.
still getting royalties.
So no, well, I'll tell you.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
So that's okay. When the Kindle was invented and was introduced, Harlequin couldn't respond fast enough. Their entire business model was cheap paperbacks, $5.99, Walmart, grocery stores. And they were like a giant tanker that couldn't turn fast enough in the marketplace. So a lot of authors left at that time because editors were leaving. Harlequin is no longer an independent company. It got bought out by HarperCollins about 10 years ago. So, and one of the other Harlequin authors and I looked at each other and said, we're smart women. We should just start a publishing company and publish other authors. And that's what we did. So for 10 years, I ran a publishing company as well as was writing my books. And what I wound up doing and what I found was the way my brain works, and this is different for everybody. You need to find what time of day
and what works for you.
What is optimum for you. And for me, the business side of things was in the morning.
Yeah.
So that's when I worked on my Bella Storia Press work with my other authors or my own marketing or marketing for the company. And then after lunch, I would sit down and write. And that I still do that. Like I will spend my mornings doing the business side of things. If I'm doing any advertising or if I'm doing some social media or if I'm working on my newsletter.
Where you're going to go.
Right, exactly. Those things I do in the morning because my optimum writing time is from about 1 o'clock on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump back to the royalty stuff because authors want to know.
Sure.
We're thinking, everyone wants to write the next best $1 million book deal.
Right.
So with Harlequin, are you still getting royalties from them, or how does that? Because I know they paid you up front.
They paid. So I got my advances, and then as long as my books were still with Harlequin, I got royalties.
Okay.
However, I requested the rights back to those 4
and they gave
books.
them to you.
Yes, over time. It takes some time.
Yeah.
But. And each one, they were sort of dripping them out, like I didn't get them all at once. And that's what several authors did who decided to become independent publishers. So I received the rights back to those books. I was able to republish them under my own imprint. I was able to create new covers. I was, and 2 of the books I renamed because I was not happy with the titles that Harlequin
So it's still the
gave
same
me.
manuscript.
Still the same story.
Interesting.
And
your name's on the cover of both.
Yes.
It's not like you have a pen name or anything.
Right. No, that's my name.
I'm thinking if someone reads the Harlequin book and then they read it, they're like, this is the same book.
Yes, but Harlequin can't sell those books anymore because I have the rights to them. I own the rights. So the only way someone would get it, might be in a secondhand store. Yeah. So, so the traditional publishing royalty rates are
fabulous.
Right.
Oh, okay. We're going to go the opposite of that.
Right. They are the opposite. And so and it's just it's really kind of pennies per book, right? It's excruciating to get a royalty
it's
check.
like squeezing out. Yeah.
Yes. And here's the other thing. With a traditional publisher, so you get an advance. You don't start earning royalties until you have earned out the advance.
Yeah.
So let's just say you get a $10,000 advance. Your book has to sell enough for you to earn $10,000 in royalties before you start getting a royalty check.
Yeah. No, it's intense.
And that's the reality. That is the reality.
And again, I think that's why the market's changing and people are self-publishing, because you can self-publish it and it's everyone thinks, oh, let's get this great book deal. Let's get the $10,000 advance. That's what you're getting. You may not see anything more.
Right.
I
mean,
and hopefully it covered your costs,
right.
Because you've traveled and,
It's a very rare book that gets these $1 million deals. And people, I think, need to sort of understand that.
It's a labor of love.
It is.
It's a labor. Yeah. It's a passion to do.
Yes.
So I'm going to jump ahead. You've done, in 2019, you did a book called Love That Moves the Sun, which won the New York City Big Book award, which is exciting, when you get these books and then these awards. And you've done many that have received awards, which is kudos to you for that, for sure.
Thank you.
Now you've written this current book called Paint the Wind, which is, number one, it's a big, thick book, so I'm like, that's a lot of time and energy right there. But, it's like you've finished it, you're self-publishing it.
Yes.
And now you're out marketing it. But your story itself is talking about these, like, I'm going to say strong women.
Yes.
And you have picked, locations that I want to say are important to you, because you have Italy and you have the Martha's Vineyard location.
Right.
So, I mean, for someone who hasn't been to Italy, or if they have been or to Martha's Vineyard, they're going to feel like they're there.
Yes,
Transform.
exactly. Yeah, and place is very important in my books, because I feel it's almost like a character, and it influences the story and has a profound impact on my characters, because place is so distinct.
Well, and it's fun, like when you're reading a fictional tale that's set in a real location, like when you go to that location, like, oh, I remember when that happened.
Yes,
and
you have to be very careful too when I was starting to write the Martha's Vineyard series. I went out to Martha's Vineyard to the Historical Society, and I was talking to the librarian. I said, I have a bar fight in a scene in Edgartown, and I would love to know the names of the bars in 1940. And he said, there were no bars in Edgartown. Edgartown was dry in the 1940s. So that would have been huge
to know. Yeah.
Huge, right? So he then started delving into his computer. He said, we did some oral histories with some guys a few years ago. Let me see if I can find something. And he said, oh, here, there's a bar in Oak Bluffs that was open at that time. It was called the Ritz.
Like a little speaking.
It is, yes,
hidden.
and it is still there.
Oh, that's so
it's
cool.
Still there. So my husband and I went and had a beer there.
That's very cool.
Right, so I could, sort of get the atmosphere. It's very dark.
I mean, it really is.
sticky.
If you're writing a specific time period, even if it's fiction, you want to keep it
Absolutely,
real.
yes.
I do have a question. Like, so when you wrote the Ritz in there, did you have to ask permission for the people there to say, I'm going to include you in my story?
I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't.
Because sometimes you're like feeling
I think
like
for places it's not so not.
Now, where does Paint the Wind take place?
Paint the Wind takes place in Vienna, Austria, and Skiathos, Greece, and Paris.
Wow.
It is the story of a young woman who starts out as an artist model and muse, and who later becomes an artist herself. But in the early 20th century, at the time when Expressionism was starting, and there was a group of artists called the Secessionists in Vienna, was a very famous
real
yes.
group.
Yes, there were, and so there are some real people in this book. And one in particular is a woman journalist who promoted modern art. And I found her journal at Smith College, and so I had her actual words, and I was very confident that the character I was writing, this fictionalized character I was writing, was based on who she actually was.
So you heard her voice,
yes.
You got it.
Yeah.
Were you able to use excerpts from her diary?
No, I was just interpreting. But I'd been to Vienna because we have family there. I'd been to Skiatha. I try to write about places I have physically been.
Yeah.
The only time I did not do that was the book that I set in Vietnam, but I did a lot of research for it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, you got over a dozen books. Kudos in 20 years.
In 20 years, yeah.
In 20 years, I'm sure you probably have another dozen coming out.
I'm about to start a 5th book in the Martha's Vineyard series.
Nice. Will you be taking another trip to Martha's Vineyard?
Probably. Yeah.
I think that's the fun part of the research.
Yes.
And you definitely, for readers out there, these are the books that just like bring you into another world. But they also give you a little history lesson.
Yeah, that's what
you're
I try to
learning
do.
about the real stuff, which is wonderful. And books have a way of doing that, So it's like it's so much better for, I think, even students sometimes to read a book than study a map.
Yes.
Because you're learning
I
history.
have to so Dancing on Sunday Afternoons is actually in the Lawrence Historical Society library, because the Lawrence mill strikes are in the book. And the director wrote to me and she said, people are much more apt to pick up a novel and learn history than they are a history textbook. So that's why my book is in their library.
I've had authors on who have even written about like the Holocaust. And it's like, even in their, think Diary of Anne Frank, like it's easier to understand that history when you're learning it from kind of firsthand point of view than when you're studying that history book.
Right.
And, it's like, and it's so important for, all of us to be able to step out of our world and just kind of go into this imaginative world and,
Right.
makes our world more exciting, I think.
Yes,
well, where can people buy this book or find more information about all your other books? And
so
you
my
and
books
like
are certainly available online on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo if you have a Kobo reader. And also the bookshop, which is a way to find independent bookstores. It can be ordered from any bookstore. And you can check out all of my books at my website, lindacardillo.com. And I'm also on Instagram as Linda Grace Cardillo.
Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Angela. This has been a
I
delight.
obviously can talk to you for hours about all of this. It's fascinating. So again, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to thank you, the audience, for, binge watching all these shows one after another on YouTube or Amazon or Apple or Spotify, or if you're watching on your local cable channel, because the local cable channels are why I'm here in studio. So thank you to Agawam Media, Studio 954, for bringing me in. And if you're looking to start writing, this is the time of the show where I give you a little writing prompt. So set your timer for 10 minutes, and today I want you to write about some locations. Think about a location you've been to, whether it's somewhere you vacationed, you used to live. I mean, it could even be something as simple as, you went to school, you went to a certain school when you were a child. Talk about that location. Describe the scenery. Describe what you see, maybe even what you're smelling, just write down the location. Be like, you know what? I remember when I, went to MGM on a, summer day and won $1 million. And now talk about was the heat, talk about the building, the parking garage you drove to, describe it so that who's reading it is right there next to you. And right now I want to say thank you for being next to me all the time watching yWrite. And we'll see you on the next episode. I'm Angela Grout. See you next time.